Islam is often presented as a very simple religion. It's just submission to Allah. But if you dig a little deeper, you find out in the Quran, Surah 4, verse 65, that submission to Allah requires complete obedience to all of Muhammad's decisions. And that's where Islam gets a lot more complicated, because Muhammad's decisions are spread across thousands of stories in the Hadith. Most Christians don't have the time, or the sources, or the desire to go through all this material and figure out what Islam teaches. No problem, that's what we're here for.
Non-Muslims, in fact people who are very filled with dislike for Islam, have still been surprised at the Quran. They've been amazed at what it has to say. The scientific ideas expressed also don't seem to originate from 14 centuries ago. Various historical sources tell us that the Prophet of Islam was very concerned with health and hygiene, very concerned with cleanliness. That was his reputation. So you would think that if you have a book which originates in his head, it should talk about medicine. That if you have this disease, you should try this. If this makes you ill, try some of this. Because history reports he had a lot of opinions on the subject. He had a lot of ideas about if this is your disease, this might be your cure. He had a lot of opinions that way, but none of them are in the Quran. There's no home remedies in the Quran that could be outdated. In fact, the Quran only mentions one item, which is not in dispute by anybody. It mentions honey, saying that in honey there's a healing. Something there is that's good in honey. I don't think anyone will argue with that. But it does not contain any of a man's opinions about what is beneficial, what's the best food to eat, or what is healthiest for you, what will cure this or that disease. Another item that you might also expect to find, if you assume this book is the product of a man's mind, is it should reflect some of what is going on in his mind. In fact, if you look up in certain encyclopedias, various books, the subject of Islam, many books will tell you that the Quran was a product of the hallucinations that this man had. Astaghfirullah. Well, if that's true, if it originated in some psychological problems going on in his mind, it should look like that. But does it? What kinds of things do you suppose went on in his mind and his heart? He had a very difficult life. He had 3 sons who died as infants. All of his daughters except one died before him. He had a wife of several years who must have been quite a woman, because in fact when the first revelation came to him, he ran home to his wife afraid. I'd suggest to you that even today you'll have a hard time finding an Arab who will tell you, I was so afraid I ran home to my wife. Won't be likely to say that. But that's how influential and strong a woman she apparently was. She died. Does the Quran mention any of these things? The death of his children, his wife? Never. Never discusses these things. And yet they must have been the things that hurt him and tortured him, caused him pain and grief through his whole life. They never show up in this book, which is supposed to originate in his tortured mind.
But we should all keep in mind that there are more than 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and that Islam places a strong emphasis on preaching and winning converts. Chances are we're not going to be there when your Muslim friends preach Islam to you, or when your children go off to college and hear about how wonderful Islam is, not only from their Muslim friends, but also from their professors.